The Holy Knights, or the God Knights of One Piece, whatever name you want to call them by, are the latest entry into a long list of anime villain groups along such names as the Akatsuki, the Phantom Troop, the Chimera Ants, or whoever else you want to put in there. And due to this association, people have come to expect them to be these absolute monsters in the One Piece universe, similar to how those other groups are in their respective universes, but they just simply aren't. Anytime faced with a real opponent in a fair fight, they get washed every single time. Like, let's call a spade. They get washed, they get packed up. In short, they suck. And people take this as a reason to say that they are bad as a group in general. This, however, is what I believe makes them so great. They aren't supposed to be these top level mountain powerhouses, at the top of the verse to overcome. They are, or what I believe at least, the natural progression of what a celestial dragon would be if they were supposed to be proper fighters, right? This is the aspect of them I believe people always miss. They aren't at the top of the food chain because they did any real training to get there. It was just straight up given to them, just like how every single thing else in their lives were just handed to them, And in today's video, I want to discuss why exactly they are so perfect for this story because of this reason. So, strap in, grab some food, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. But with all that out the way, let's get it done. Honestly, looking back at the introduction of the Holy Knights to the story, I can understand why people thought they'd be this huge threat to the universe at large of One Piece. Two of them are relatives of the literal strongest pirate of the modern day. Argue with your mama about it, it's Shanks. Shanks is the most powerful pirate of the modern day. Let's just put it out there, call a spade a spade. Each of them being his father and one being his literal twin, respectively. So they kind of just have the same potential, at least Shamrock, from a Shamrock perspective. Garling's a fraud. I don't fuck with Gamera. I don't fuck with Garling. Fuck Garling. There's also the fact that Gunko was able to hurt Loki, albeit a restrained Loki, but it does say quite a lot about her power. They were even set up as the only authority who were sanctioned to be able to harm and kill celestial dragons without facing repercussions, something that not even the three admirals are allowed to do. So if I looked at all this information in isolation, I can see how people would think that they are stronger than maybe say the admirals or the people below them. But if we look at the track record of how One Piece tells its story, strength doesn't always equal authority. This is why I think they are so perfect for the story that's being told. They're an evolution of the idea of being given every single thing in life. Look at characters like Spandam or even early series Helmeppo, right? These are people who had power in proximity to someone more powerful than they are. They had power by proxy. They didn't have power due to their own abilities or anything that they earned themselves. And in some ways, this made for an even better villain than the people with the actual strength. Think about the fight with Luffy and Rob Lucci. It was great, it was fantastic, and it was so satisfying when Luffy finally beat him because, Luffy would stay down, he would always get back up for the fight. But I don't think it compares to when Robin just finally, snapped Spandam's spine. She snapped her spine. I'm gonna show it again. She did it. It was fantastic. I loved it. That was such a satisfying scene, and we always see that the higher up that you go in the world government, the more the world is being oppressed by individuals who have done nothing to be in those positions or earn those positions, right? It's by people who don't have any real power to back it up on their own. While this is a major theme, the thing that makes the Holy Knights different from other anime groups or even other villains within the One Piece universe is that they don't train at all for, as far as we know, they really don't train. At least with the way that the admirals and pirate villains we have seen throughout, One Piece have trained. They trained the abilities that they had, and they came up with creative ways to make up for possibly having a bad devil fruit, or they would just straight up train their hockey to the point they would become, monsters within the universe themselves. And now we can look at characters like Saint Summers, Killingham, or even Gunko. They are equipped with fruits, devil fruits, right out of the box that are just insane. They're just insane abilities off the bat. Summers' fruit is called a Thorn fruit. And while I know that does sound a little bit silly, it's One Piece. Bear with me, I promise, The thorns are invisible and also have the added benefit that if someone who was ensnared in the thorns were to be touched by somebody who loves them, no matter how powerful, they will experience extreme pain. In fact, the more a person loves the person who is ensnared within the thorns, the more pain that person will experience. And then next up, we have Saint Killingham, who has a mythical Zoan fruit. And if you know anything about One Piece currently, mythical Zoan fruits are essentially just running the game. They are the most powerful fruits. It's not Logias anymore. It's a mythical Zoan. If you have a mythical Zoan, you're probably at the top of the verse now. Like, I'm gonna call a spade a spade. And it's a mythical dragon fruit, which that was literally, Kaido was powerful on his own, don't get me wrong, but that fruit really aimed Kaido. And we had such a struggle fighting Kaido. And his is the dragon fruit model Kirin, which, shout out to Sasuke, which enables him to put people to sleep and be able to force their worst nightmares or dreams. But he usually chooses nightmares because, he is who he is, to manifest within the real world. And they're able to act independently of Saint Killingham, which means that he doesn't need to control them or do anything with them. And that's just an innate ability of the fruit. He didn't have to train to really do anything. He didn't have to train to do any of that. It's not like how Luffy, Luffy's body could stretch and stuff like that when he was a kid, but he had to train to be able to actually use the fruit properly. That shit's just out of the box. Think about that, bro. That's just out of the box. And then finally we have Gunko, who has the Paramecia fruit, the arrow fruit, which allows the user to control the concepts of arrows. But I think a better way of defining and thinking about this fruit is that she essentially controls vectors. The arrows are these tangible things, so they can pin people or straight up pierce them, but they can't do anything to damage them. The person who's being attacked by the arrows can't do anything to damage the arrows. Like, they're tangible in the fact that they can pierce them and hurt them, but they're not tangible to be touched, which is just crazy. It's a crazy one-way street. Abilities like that are always kind of busted. And there's also the added benefit that once she does pierce you, the user is able to move you in any direction regardless of weight. So think of a pre-Gear 5 Luffy, because I definitely think Gear 5 Luffy currently would just take him out with his Toon Force, right? But pre-Gear 5 Luffy, stick him with an arrow, vector him into the ocean, and I don't think anything in the way can actually stop it, as long as Gunko wants it to stop. I'm not 100% sure in that, but still, the idea is there. The idea that you could do it is there. Now compare this to the admirals, whom people at one point considered to have the most powerful devil fruits in the series, because Logias were at one point or other considered the most powerful fruits within the series. Sure, they were just out the box awesome fruits, like the magma fruit, or the ice fruit, or the glint fruit. I'm not 100% sure on the names. I think it's magma, glint, and ice for Kuzan. And then we have I'm assuming it's the forest fruit, but that admiral's a bum. I don't really like him, so I don't really care. But the point being is that they needed to train to use their fruits to the full potential. And as I said, while Logia is already powerful by themselves, they are hard countered by Haki. So this means that the person who is a Logia user also has to be proficient in Haki. The Holy Knights don't, because the main thing though that separates the Holy Knights from everyone else is the pact that they have with Imu, which on top of their fruits grants them immortality and just fast travel to anywhere in the world that they want. All of these abilities were powerful enough on their own, but the added immortality is what really makes these characters so dangerous. They were just given the most broken abilities and see themselves as above the people who already see themselves as above the rest of the world, And next, I do want to address something, which is the real reason why you think they suck within the story of One Piece. So the real reason the Holy Knights seem to suck is honestly just when they were introduced, which is late in the series, when at this point all we're seeing is what I'd call the dogs of this series. Like, if we're calling it a band, like even in the flashbacks that we see them in, they're supposed to be contending with the upper echelon of the One Piece verse. You know, speaking from the flashbacks perspective, the first time we see Garling, a young Garling, in action, he's facing off against the most legendary pirate ever, Rox Dizabek, or Davy Dizabek, his real name, with his entire crew, who, let's not forget, are all basically admiral level, because two of them were literally modern day admirals. You know, he had Whitebeard. Whitebeard was that man's second in command. Whitebeard. That man had Lin on it. He had Kaido. Yeah, he had 3 admirals. He had 3 of the 4 admirals. He had Kaido on there. Like, come on, bro. Like, they're going up against, you know, like, country busters, no? And then we have the Roger Pirates over here, who are just running around in God Valley, and, you know, all this to say, honestly, if these characters were introduced any earlier, especially since Conqueror's Conqueror's Haki wasn't as explored as it was until Wano, I don't think they would have struggled as much as they did. And I don't want you to get the wrong idea that this is me defending them in any way. I don't like them. They're bums, especially looking at you, Figurlin Garling. Figurlin Garling, you're a bum. The only thing you really did in this story was stab the mother of your children. You know, just to let you know that. But again, this is what makes them so good. They aren't supposed to be these mountains to overcome, just because that's how they themselves see themselves. They're ants, they're pests within the story. They're supposed to be annoying. Think about how obnoxiously rich people are in today's society. No matter how you try to ignore them to the best of your abilities, they always find some way to push themselves in the front of the news by probably doing something involving politics or whatever. And, you know, this is what I think their immortality really represents. And we know this because of how they use it. The years Shanks spent on Roger's ship, Garling sent Summers, among other Holy Knights, time and time again to retrieve Shanks, always failing, but never giving up. And this isn't some type of grit or, you know, them being just this resilient kind of thing, resilient people. It's based on the fact that they see him as one of their own, Shanks. And Garling, who is the commander, wants his son back because he wants him to be there with him to train him or whatever. But also they have, train him, I guess. I think they're really the only ones who train, as far as I know, the Figurlin family, which is probably why they're so strong in the Holy Land. But also they just have no fear of the idea of death. If they were introduced anywhere else in the story before now, they would be a legitimate threat to the Straw Hats. I mean, they kind of are currently, and it's only because they don't have the knowledge necessary to defeat them yet, you know. But once Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, like, come on, bro, it's so obvious that he's gonna learn Conquerors, all learn how to use Conqueror's Haki properly to defeat them, they should just become like a non-factor for them as the story progresses, the same way that they were for the Roger Pirates. But this is their purpose in the story. Aside from, like I said, Shamrock and Garling, I do believe Shamrock more than anybody else is going to be a legit threat. Garling might be now because he's an elder, you know, what we saw in Egghead, so maybe he'll be a threat. We don't know. But the real threat of what enables and makes the Holy Knights scary is Imu. I believe more than anything, they're only supposed to be extensions of him. That is what should make them scary to us as an audience. If the Holy Knights show up, there is always this added fear that Imu, you know, as we see on on Elbaf currently, Imu has the ability to use them as a proxy. And once Imu uses them as a proxy, Imu can come in and use Dami Reversi. This is what makes the Holy Knights so scary. It's not the fact of them being who they are, because they're frauds. They suck. They have these amazing devil fruit powers, and they can't do anything with it. It's just crazy how bad they are. Oh my god, it's crazy how bad they are. But yeah, that's what makes them scary. Imu can come in, Dami Reversi, as he's doing on Elbaf with the Giants, and take over and be this threat. And that's also what Imu did on God Valley. That's what made the God Valley incident the God Valley incident. If Imu didn't show up on God Valley, the Pirates would have just won. Like, they would have just won. If who was it? Saint, the dude that got killed, I'll put a picture up of him. If he didn't, even if he went into his spider form on God Valley, he still would have gotten taken out. Like Roger, Garp, and Zebek and Whitebeard, Kaido, bro, he would have been gone. The immortality is the only claim to fame they have. They're immortality merchants, to put it quite simply. They aren't a real threat outside of their immortality, and we see this because Garling literally gets off-screened by one Rox D Zebek. And that's not to downplay Zebek, but come on, bro. Garling, he's not doing anything. But, you know, let me get into my closing arguments so we can wrap this up. People have this perception of anime villain groups that they're supposed to be this mountain of power for the main characters to overcome. And while the Holy Knights, to some degree, are a current representation of this, they aren't supposed to be this for the entirety of the story. Oda has established that the Celestial Dragons are as rotten to the core as a creature can be. They believe in nothing more than the fact that their birthright makes them superior. So why wouldn't the elite fighting squad of the Holy Knights, of the Celestial Dragons, who are raised in the same, if not better conditions, be the same way? They buy, sell, pillage, and rape people as they have a liking according to their own whims. Why would people who have never had a struggle to overcome in their entire lives be able to produce the same amount of power that people who spent their entire lives working for it could? Why should they sit comfortably at the top as they themselves think they deserve? They are parasites in the world who prey on the weak, and this is why, more than anything, they are fantastic within the story of One Piece. They are a commentary on the rich, you know, the people who think that just because of what they have or their birthright, they're better than us. That's what they represent. You know, I don't think those people, if they form this elite fighting squad, if they hired the best trainers in the world, would become better than somebody who went to the gym day in, day out, a martial artist. There we go. A martial artist who didn't grow up rich, who grew up in somewhere else. I don't know. Think Matt Murdock. There we go. Matt Murdock grew up poor in Hell's Kitchen, trained day in, day out boxing and all that kind of stuff. I don't think somebody who had all the money in the world, if they didn't have that same work ethic and drive, would have the same would have the same fighting capabilities as somebody as Matt Murdock. Think of it that way. You know, they've been given all the power in the world, and yet they choose to do nothing of value with it, because for the most part they are incapable of thinking for themselves outside of what they think they deserve. They aren't the Akatsuki or the Phantom Troop, who at one point or another were all individuals who earned their power before they teamed up. I can speak more so on the Akatsuki than the Phantom Troop, but they all earned their power before they teamed up. The Holy Knights are leeches, simply put. Like, they didn't earn anything. They were given it and they choose to abuse it. That's all they do. But that's the video. If you agree or disagree, which I don't know how you would disagree with me, but whatever, maybe you're rich and you got offended by this video or something, but please let me know down below. You know, please consider subscribing. We're still trying to hit 1,000 subs by the end of the month. We're gonna do it. We're at 941 right now. We're doing pretty good right now. And you know, leave a like, and as always, I love you guys, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.